Hi, I'm Christa Jacobson, headmistress of the Budo, where we teach authentic ninjutsu and classical samurai bujutsu. And for those of you who don't know what that is, it's the ancient martial arts of the ninja and samurai. In today's video, we're going to be discussing tradition, the importance of tradition, the importance of maintaining a tradition and then passing that on to the next generation. That's what we're going to be focusing on today. You know, we live in a world with modern technology, internet access, smartphones. We're constantly seeing updates, social media apps. Everyone's posting information constantly. And because of the way that life tends to be now, a lot of people don't take a step back and really focus on, where we're from and the history and tradition and culture and maintaining a specific tradition and make sure that that tradition can be passed to the next generation. And to me, I think that's one of the most important and crucial aspects to the martial arts. So today I thought I would take a few minutes and talk about this particular subject with all of you. Now, before I begin, I always give a shout out to all of my new viewers. So if this is the first video that you guys have seen of me, my name is Christa Jacobson. I'm the headmistress of the Budo, which means School of the Warrior Way. We teach Koryu Ninjutsu and Koryu Bujutsu, so the ancient martial arts of the ninja and samurai. This organization does have other areas of focus, such as reality-based self-defense, weapons training and tactics, concealed carry, survival skills, martial arts theory, thought, and philosophy, martial arts conditioning. If any of these topics interest you at all, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and don't forget to click the bell. I do post 2 to 3 videos every single week, so if you're interested in any of those topics, please subscribe, click the bell, and keep up with what we're doing. So to start, I want to talk about the time that we live now in the modern era. We live in an era where there is so much information readily at our fingertips, whether it's internet access, smartphones, computers. We have all this technology. I mean, right now I'm making a video by holding a smartphone in my hand as I'm driving around to, run my errands. I mean, we just live in a world that's just so technologically advanced. But why is it as people we haven't changed from the horrific things that we've done from the past? Like an example, we have all this information. We can look up certain things and we can see certain wars and hatred and racism and prejudice and sexist and all these things, and yet we still see racism, sexism, bigotry, prejudice. It's still alive and well today, right? Why is it that we have all this information, yet we still don't change the way that we approach certain things? And one thing that tradition gives us is it gives us a look back to the past. It gives us a look back not just to history, but a look at generation after generation of grandmasters within the arts that had a certain outlook on life and how to behave and how to handle yourself in certain situations. And I think that is something that needs to be held as this precious item, this gem. And these lessons are something that I feel has to be preserved and passed down to the next generation. I mean, there's kind of a saying, it says right now in the modern world we're drowning in knowledge and starving for wisdom, and I definitely think there's definitely some truth to that. I feel like anyone who's in the Budo, you guys know the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And right now, so many people have so much information, they have so much knowledge, but they don't know how to apply it and make themselves better people. And I think sometimes taking out the human element of information is what makes people become more hateful or closed-minded or absolute, almost like an elitist, they're right, everyone else is wrong, and then they become very hateful and hurtful to other people. Within tradition, what you see is something that's been passed down from one generation to the next. You see that it means something, it's very deep, and it's meant to make you a better person and to help the people around you. That's just outside of the martial arts. And then within the martial arts, it's something that's constantly being refined from one generation to the next. I think that when you look at history and tradition, even if we're just looking at something like ninja and samurai, we know that the ninjutsu and bujutsu that was done within the Sengoku period was much different than that in the Edo period. And then from the Edo period, we know that was much different than the Meiji period, and et cetera, et cetera. We know that there's a growth within the arts as the generations progress, and that growth is because of tradition, because the Grandmasters and those who have mastered these skills and are passing them on to the next generation has refined these skills to a certain point to be able to say, okay, this is the way that we do them in the now. That doesn't take away from history. Everything has a historical point of creation, and everything was done in a time in history. But like an example earlier when I said Bujutsu and Ninjutsu was different in the Sengoku period than Edo period, that's true. Both of those are two different historical time periods. They're both in history. So when people talk about martial arts now, and they're talking about traditional martial arts, those of us who are passing on a tradition, as we pass on these traditions and we pass them to the next generation, the time period that we're living now is going to become history. And when you look back at a tradition, you can see how things start to not necessarily change as absolute, but you can see the same principles, philosophies, and strategies of the kata and how they're applied differently through the generations. And I think that is very important to know that. And it's actually a very beautiful aspect to tradition, because all of us who's in traditional martial arts, whether that's ninjutsu, bujutsu, kobujutsu, or kinjutsu, iaijutsu, jujutsu, taijutsu, whatever, we all love tradition, and we all love looking at the ancient kata and waza and doing the various different fighting techniques that the masters wrote on the scrolls. But then there's also this aspect to, okay, that this is the way they wrote it in the scrolls, and here's some of the various henka that they've discussed in the densho. Now, how do we do that today within the world that we live? How can we apply that today with, again, modern technology? Ninja and samurai were fighting against, they did have firearms, but teppo jutsu isn't the same as modern firearms that we see today. Swords and spears and things like that. Here we're dealing with lots of different types of threats. That's something they didn't ever have to defend themselves against. So principles and strategies will always remain. The techniques will change over time, but the principles still remain, and they transcend time. And that idea of the principles and strategy and philosophy and teaching those old ways is part of the tradition, and being able to teach the way that it was in history, so we don't repeat that process. And then how you can apply that in the modern day, I think, is a very, like I said, it's a very beautiful aspect to tradition. Tradition doesn't just connect us to the past, it also connects us to the previous Grandmasters and all the thoughts and philosophies and strategies that they felt needed to be preserved and passed to the next generation. I'm going to tell you a story, and this story I think really does emphasize the importance of tradition and why we do what we do. And it's a great story, and I've said this in different videos before, but it's a story about a little girl. And this little girl goes into the kitchen and she sees her mom cooking a ham for the holiday. She watches how the mom prepares the ham, and she cuts it a certain way, and then she puts it in the oven. She asks her mom, she says, "Mom, why do you cut the ham that way before you put it in the oven?" The mom just looked at her and smiled, and she said, "You need to go into the other room and talk to Granny. Granny will tell you why we cut the ham this way." So the little girl walks in the other room and she sees Granny, and she says, "Granny, why does Mom cut the ham a certain way before she puts it in the oven?" Granny just smiled at her and she says, "Oh dear, just go in the other room and talk to Great Granny. Great Granny will tell you exactly why we cut a ham that way." So the little girl says, okay, and she walks in the other room and she sees Great Granny. And she said, "Great Granny, why does Mom cut the ham a certain way before she puts it in the oven?" And Great Granny just looked at her and smiled and said, "Well, dear, when I was your age, I saw my mom cut the ham that way. The stoves were so small back then, that was the only way that we could prepare a ham for the holiday. And because that's the way I learned how to cook a ham, I had to teach my daughter, your grandmother, how to cook a ham, so that's how she learned how to cook a ham. And then she had to teach her daughter, which is your mom, how to cook a ham, so that's how she does it. And now your mom is teaching you how to cook a ham." This story, although I just gave you a very short, brief description of the story, I think is so beautiful, because that aspect of tradition, it's still passed on, it's still done a certain way, even though the technology has changed from Great Granny all the way to the little girl. In the original, it was the stoves were a certain way. and now they're not, but they're still maintaining that tradition. The purpose of the story is that you're seeing that they're doing something and maintaining a tradition of something that's very near and dear to their hearts. And I think that's the important aspect, is that we're doing something that's very near and dear to us, very deeply within, right? And the story doesn't talk about the ingredients of the ham, how they you know, what the things that they make the ham taste better, or all the conversations that may happen around the dinner table while they're all eating the ham. It's about preparing the ham, doing something in preparation, and they've done that over the generations. And I think that is a very it's a very beautiful story on a very deep level if you look at it from that perspective, right? And although the stoves obviously have changed over all the generations, the way that they prepare that ham for the holiday is still the same. Now here at the Budo I teach 7 warrior traditions. Now some of these warrior traditions are actually family traditions that were passed down in a warrior family from one generation to the next, right? Some of the traditions are more combative traditions, and they were just passed down to the warrior class from one generation to the next. But regardless of the specifics, it is a complete honor for me every single day to go down to the dojo and share these 7 traditions that's been passed down from one generation to the next, and teach my students something that's steeped in history and tradition and culture, and not just help them understand, you know, the warrior arts, becoming a better martial artist and becoming really good with the combative aspects of self-defense and survival. It's more than that. It's also about learning the philosophies and strategies and principles that the Grandmasters have taught from one generation to the next, and allows them to just be better people, right? And I think that's something that's just really true and near and dear to my heart. And it's just a complete honor to be able to share what I've learned with my students. So there's today's video. If you guys enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel. Like I said, I do post 2 to 3 videos every single week. If you guys are interested in authentic ninjutsu and classical samurai bujutsu, please check out my website at budo-ninjutsu.com. There you guys can see a list of the skills, the 7 traditions, the philosophies and strategies that we teach. If you don't live next to one of our schools, you guys can always join the Budo online ninjutsu dojo, and you guys can start training with us that way. So again, thank you guys very much for your love and support. I deeply appreciate it. And until next time, take care, be safe, and good luck in your journey of Budo. Bye.